Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Season 2 of Cohort W. I'm your host, USAWOC faculty member and current Warrant Officer Historical Foundation Fellow, CW5 Leonard Bomany. In today's episode, our incredible guest will share some personal and professional experience, mentorship, and leadership as a senior warrant officer. The senior warrant officer will then examine how this insight should ultimately influence action, development, and education within their corps and possibly even the greater cohort. The conversation is directed at leader development, talent management, and what they are doing to support the Army for large-scale combat operations. Finally, all Cohort W guests will have an opportunity to share a favorite anecdote from their career as a senior warrant officer. Today, I am joined by the U.S. Army Combined Arms Support Command Chief Warrant Officer, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Taylor. Thanks so much for your time today, sir.
No, thank you, Mr. Momney. I really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the time today.
Could you just take a few moments to share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Danny Taylor. Grew up in San Antonio, Texas, enlisted in the Army in 1993 and became an automotive maintenance technician in 2002. Currently serving as the Senior Warrant Officer or the Command Chief Warrant Officer here at the United States Army Combined Arms Support Command, also known as CASCOM, and the Sustainment Center of Excellence at Fort Lee, Virginia, which I got to add will soon be renamed to Fort Gregg Adams, which is going to be named after two special individuals. So Lieutenant General retired Arthur Gregg is a career logistician and a former Department of the Army G4 that focused on logistics for the entire U.S. Army. And then Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams, who was an adjutant general officer who commanded the 6th 888th Postal Battalion in Europe and was the highest ranking African-American female officer during World War II. So it's pretty good naming for or renaming for Fort Lee.
I would have to agree. Just a tremendous new direction. And we are actually about to be renamed from Rucker to Novasol. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your MOS title, and maybe give us a little bit more information about that feeder MOS or possibly other feeder MOSs that could work into your area of specialty?
Certainly. So, like I said, I enlisted in 1993, and back then it was a 63 Bravo that I signed up for, and that was a light wheel vehicle mechanic, which now that MOS is 91 Bravo. So after about 9 years of enlisted experience, I applied and then was selected for 915 Alpha, which was a unit maintenance technician. And I tell you, I love being a part of the Ordnance Corps. I love maintenance. I've always enjoyed working with my hands and using tools. I've always enjoyed troubleshooting and then just fixing something that isn't working the way it's supposed to work. So that's kind of my happy space there. I decided to become a warrant officer to kind of stay in the maintenance field for my entire career. So by design, warrant officers are single track technicians, and most come from specific feeder enlisted MOSs and have that experience or background in order to build upon that technical depth. And I tell you, when I joined the Army right after high school, I didn't have any college. So, over my career, I've taken different college classes in the evening hours, or even on the weekends, and have earned 2 degrees, an associate's degree, and liberal arts and a bachelor's degree in organizational development. So all of that using tuition assistance. So my advice to any non-commissioned officers that may be listening, there's a few things I'll highlight. Time management is important, definitely perseverance, and then focus in attaining your goal. I tell you, I earned my first degree after 17 years of service. And then I earned my second degree after 21 years of service. So that shows you just how long it took me to earn my degrees. That's just the way it took me. I took one class per semester, but over time, I was able to earn those degrees just through perseverance.
That's incredible. And if I remember correctly, because many of the listeners probably wouldn't know that our families were friends,
That's
back
right.
when you were assigned to the Warrant Officer Career College. I think that was in your senior TAC days. But you later went on to do training with industry. And I think that probably contributed to your educational experience as well.
I did. Yeah. So I had a great opportunity to apply for and was selected to train with industry, or the training with industry program, as you described, or TWI. So I spent 1 year with Caterpillar Defense and Federal Products in Mossville, which is just outside of Peoria, Illinois. And I tell you, it was a fantastic experience working with those engineers and those professionals and those product support individuals there in Illinois. But I learned a lot about Caterpillar technology, because a majority of our ground vehicles are powered by Caterpillar engines. And there's also power generation equipment and different other types of engines. Follow-on assignment after that was at CASCOM here at Fort Lee, and I served as a capability developer, which means a capability developer works with the different program managers, TACOM in this case, or Tank Automotive and Armament Command, which is a lifecycle management command, and then different manufacturers to ensure that once a piece of equipment is fielded to the Army, that piece of equipment is logistically supportable, meaning there's repair parts, there are technical manuals, there are the right tools available for the maintainers and the operators to use to ensure that that piece of equipment can be used the way it's supposed to be used out in the field. So it was a fantastic opportunity.
It sure sounds like it. And thank you for just going a little bit more in depth on training with industry. I know that there are many out there who have a lot of questions about what warrant officers do, how we are specially educated, what are some of the programs that are open to us, really. That's definitely one of the bigger ones, especially for technical warrants. So you're not just a command chief warrant officer representing a single branch. You're operating at the COE level that has consolidated a couple of different elements. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So what I like to do is I like to describe the Army's 6 different warfighting functions. And you can look in FM or Field Manual 3-0, which covers operations, and there's 6 basic functions. And most of our branches across the Army fit into one of those 6 different warfighting functions. So obviously sustainment is one of those 6 functions. So think of it this way: any operation, any deployment, or any mission has to be sustained. It must have elements of sustainment. So that allows 3 things: freedom of action, operational reach, and then prolonged endurance. So underneath sustainment, there are 6 different branches or 6 different corps, and 4 of those 6 have warrant officers. So in total, we have 19 warrant officer MOSs underneath CASCOM and the Sustainment Center of Excellence, and I'll kind of list them out. So starting with ordnance, which is our largest technical branch. So think ammunition, most ground maintenance on weapons, vehicles, tanks, trailers, generators, radar, radios, and then missile systems. We also have explosive ordnance disposal technicians, or EOD, as well as explosive safety. Basically maintaining combat power and maintaining combat lethality. And in total, ordnance has 9 different warrant officer MOSs. So then we have quartermaster. So think supply, property book, fuel handling, water purification, food, culinary specialists, our cooks, mortuary affairs, aerial delivery, and then our riggers in airborne units. So in total, quartermaster has 5 different warrant officer MOSs. And then we have transportation. So most think of the 88 Mike enlisted MOS, which is the motor transport operator, or our truck drivers, but there's more. So think unit movement officers, or our UMOs. Think mobility, which includes rail and then aircraft as well. Think movement control and even watercraft, in the sea and the maritime domain. So a lot of folks don't know that the Army has tugboats, landing craft, and then logistics support vessels that are manned and operated by Transportation Corps personnel. And there's even some warrant officers that command vessels and detachments that are in the Transportation Corps. So they have a phrase or a saying that says, nothing happens until something moves in the Transportation Corps. And they have 3 warrant officer MOSs under transportation. Under sustainment, there's also logistics. And I'll tell you, that's a pretty unique branch, because that's only for O-grade officers, not warrant officers. And those O grades typically, once they complete their company command and they're a captain and they've completed a certain level of professional military education, then they take off their ordnance, quartermaster, or transportation branch insignia, and they pin on the logistics insignia, and then they remain logistics throughout the remainder of their career. So again, I just want to clarify that we don't have any logistics warrant officers, as in we don't have any warrant officers that wear the logistics branch insignia on our uniforms. We stay, for example, I stay ordnance my entire career. Then we have adjutant general or adjutants general corps. Think human resources, S1s, G1s, and then even the Army band. And that's primarily for honors, morale, and then cross-cultural purposes. And the AG Corps has 2 warrant officer MOSs. And then finally, finance. So think your S8s or your G8s or your resource managers in your organizations. And just for clarity, the Army does not have finance warrant officers out there. So those are our 6 different branches across sustainment. And most of the training is done here at Fort Lee, Virginia. And the branch headquarters and the branch proponent offices and the commandants are here on Fort Lee. But we also have other training locations at Joint Base Langley Eustis. Fort Benning, Georgia, for example, is where we train our tank and Bradley mechanics. Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Gordon, Eglin Air Force Base trains our EOD, and then Little Creek, Virginia, which is home of the Army's School of Music. We also have the Soldier Support Institute at Fort Jackson, which is the home of the Adjutant General School, and then the Finance and Comptroller School, which also fall under the sustainment warfighting function. And I also got to add that some of our courses also teach service members from different branches or different services within the military, like the Marine Corps, the Navy, or the Air Force. We also have an Army Logistics University on Fort Lee that includes 3 different colleges and then a non-commissioned officer academy as well. And they're responsible for teaching officers, warrant officers, non-commissioned officers, and other training courses for soldiers, as well as DA civilians. And I'll just give you a couple examples: the Joint Logistics course, the Capability Development course, and then the Support Operation course is taught here at Fort Lee's Army Logistics University. So I know that was a lot to unpack, but I think it's important for listeners to fully understand the breadth of the role and the importance of sustainment and logistics across the Army.
No, I really appreciate that and the detail and really just anchoring the explanation in doctrine. It sounds like there's a warrant officer at almost every corner of sustainment and systems maintainment that is keeping the Army running.
That's right.
What is your work as a senior warrant officer leader at the Center of Excellence sort of involve? Because you are pulling together multiple branches and corps under the COE umbrella. So how does that work come together to help the Army as a whole?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll frame it this way. So in total, the Army has about 29,000, it's almost 29,000 warrant officer authorizations or spaces across the Army, across the active Army, National Guard, and the Army Reserve. And of those 29,000, almost 9,000 of those authorizations are in our 4 branches, Ordnance, Quartermaster, Transportation, and then Adjutant General across the active duty, National Guard, and the Army Reserve. So like I said earlier, 19 different MOSs. So in fact, about 62% of our authorizations are in the Guard and the Reserves. So our 4 branches, Ordnance, Quartermaster, Transportation, and Adjutant General, each have a Chief Warrant Officer of the branch, otherwise called a CWOB, which is a CW5 that serves as the senior warrant officer for that entire branch or corps, not just the schoolhouse. And he or she works closely with the branch commandant, who's typically a 1-star general, and then the command sergeant major on all things that relate to warrant officers. So not only the execution of training here at the schoolhouse, but training development, personnel development, force structure, so think TOEs, MTOEs, and TDAs, our authorization documents for personnel and equipment, the training with industry program, which I covered earlier, grade plate reviews, doctrine, and then warrant officer sessions. So I don't know if a lot of folks know, but the branch proponencies have the responsibility of reviewing every single warrant officer application packet that gets submitted before it actually gets boarded. You can also think .mil-PF. It's an acronym the Army uses for doctrine, organization, training, material, leader development, personnel, and then facilities. So across each of those domains, the branches have the responsibility for all things that relate to that specific proponency. And then prior to serving in this assignment, I served as the Ordnance Chief Warrant Officer of the branch and worked with the school and the Ordnance Corps there. So kind of getting back to your question, right, as the CASCOM and the Sustainment Center of Excellence Senior Warrant Officer, I represent all 4 branches in the sustainment warfighting function. And then I advise the Commanding General, the Command Sergeant Major, and the Center of Excellence on all warrant officer matters. Some of them include leader development, assignments, education, and then force structure. And then we also help communicate and then help integrate warrant officer actions between Department of the Army, Training and Doctrine Command, or TRADOC, Army Material Command, or AMC, Army Futures Command, or AFC, in terms of modernization. And then Human Resources Command, or HRC, the Recruiting Command, National Guard Bureau, U.S. Army Reserve Command as well, and then the operating force. So like Forces Command, the different corps, divisions, and then the brigades as well. Also have some opportunities to talk with different professional military education classes as they come through Fort Lee, and also able to visit units around the country to talk with different soldiers as well. So some fantastic opportunities there.
And what's fantastic for our listeners to hear is that this is a senior warrant officer working cross compo or cross active guard reserve. As you said, you had about 60% of the allocated positions sitting in 2 or 3?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. 62%. Yeah. Yeah, which is it's a pretty big amount when you look at it. A lot of our capabilities on the sustainment side are in the guard and the reserve components.
Now, right. You had mentioned leader development just a second ago. So what are some specific initiatives or focal points regarding leader development and talent management that you would like to communicate to the warrant officers in your purview and the leaders they support?
Yeah, so there's a few that I can think of. One of the first ones is a relatively new program that started probably in the last year or so, and that's called Project Athena. And, think self-development and self-improvement for when students come to their professional military education. When they start at the basic course, all the way through their different levels of PME. So when they come here, or even when they go to Fort Rucker, they're going to take various assessments and then get feedback from their small group leaders to help improve themselves. And then they also are supposed to receive what we call an individual development plan, which is a DA Form 7906, which actually kind of outlines, it's almost like a 5-year plan that kind of outlines goals, short-term goals and long-term goals as well. And that's supposed to kind of help develop and improve them in their awareness of their career over time. Another area is PME, or professional military education. So all of our branches, not just ours, but all of the branches across the Army are analyzing their PME to make sure it's relevant and then impactful. And I'll tell you specifically, across our 19 different MOSs, we have just over 40 different courses that we teach here, and they range anywhere from a week all the way up to 39 weeks in length. Another area that I can think of is the importance of data literacy and then data education, especially since we use different logistics systems such as GCSS Army for supply and maintenance transactions, TC Ames on the transportation side, SASMOD, which is an ammunition management software, and then IPSAVE, which is not just for the human resources, but it's for all leaders and all personnel to be able to use. And that's being rolled out here this month and in the next month across, mainly Compo 1 or the active duty, even though the National Guard's been using it for a couple of years now. But I say all that because as a warrant officer, we have to be technical experts on those different systems that I mentioned to help kind of integrate those different pieces. And I also like to think of that cognitive hierarchy. You take a bunch of data that comes out of these systems, and how do you take that data to become information And then how does that information become knowledge? And that knowledge has to become understanding over time so that we can make faster and better decisions with all of the data that we have. And then just a couple other points. So there's something called the MER, or the Mission Essential Requirements listing. And I absolutely think it's important to help active duty warrant officers and commanders understand that MER listing and how it drives assignments during our manning cycles. I mean, that's critical. We have a pre-command course here at Fort Lee called the Sustainment Pre-Command Course, and that's where we talk with lieutenant colonels, and command sergeants major that are in command positions. And during their time here, we actually have a senior warrant officer panel. And one of the common topics that we discuss is making sure that those leaders understand that MER and how it works and how it impacts warrant officer manning in their respective units. And then finally, the last thing I'll touch on is, it's no secret that there's some critical shortages in some of our MOSs across the Army for warrant officers. And many of our warrant officer MOSs are impacted as well. So as the Army kind of analyzes this problem, we have to kind of focus on the four main buckets, as I like to call them, and they're pretty much in line with the Army People Strategy lines of effort. And those are assess, develop, employ, and retain. How do we get better in each one of those areas for our warrant officers? How can we improve in each of those areas?
Yeah, I think those are critical, as you say, buckets to focus on, regardless of what branch you may be in as a warrant officer, because we have to get better at identifying talent and recruiting that talent and helping them through the assessments process. The shifting sands of the operational environment, combined with dynamic and impactful changes in technology, like you were just mentioning, create a constant reframing of exactly what we consider important to the education of the warrant officer cohort. What education or training, whether technical or Common Core, do you see as being relevant and impactful to the development of Army warrant officers, especially in the context of the future fight? And can you explain why you feel that way?
My opinion here, I think the Army's training and developmental process, the schoolhouse, the time during not only advanced individual training that we all attend, but the different PME or professional military education, like all of that's got to must keep pace with modernization efforts. And we don't always do well at that. Army Futures Command stood up about 4 years ago to kind of accelerate the acquisition and modernization process in the Army. But on the TRADOC side, we've got to be able to keep up with that material fielding and that training to make sure that new systems are not only logistically supportable with minimal to no contractors, minimal to no contracted logistics support, but that we deliver the training at the right time. And we've got to be able to order repair parts, Class 9, for these new modernized systems. We have to have the right technical manuals. We have to have the right tools to be able to maintain these modernized pieces of equipment as well.
All this gets back to investment into talent, and talent management of personnel is a major undertaking, and it's a critical component of organizational success. How are you approaching the recruitment and subsequent management of talent?
So I will say that here at CASCOM and the Sustainment Center of Excellence, we fully acknowledge and then support the Army's recruiting main effort right now. This also applies to the warrant officer population as well. We've got to be able to kind of plant that seed earlier in soldiers' mind about potentially becoming a warrant officer. We've got to help educate them and help them understand of the role and the definition of an Army warrant officer and how we build and maintain readiness for our Army. And our junior and senior warrant officers as well must play that active role in helping do that. I'll also tell you that, I'm a pretty big fan of the AIM-2 resume that we have now, we've had for a few years now, and how the officer can basically build and edit their own resume to add more details and depth during that assignment process. I will say that resume absolutely enhances talent management.
I'm an educator. I'm always looking for innovative ideas on education. Can you offer some thoughts on how you feel warrant officer education could be best modernized?
Certainly. So my opinion here, but The Army's got to change. We must change the way we send warrant officers to PME. Typically, a warrant officer attends their PME after they submit a DA Form 4187, and typically they're TDY in return, like many of us have done. And with many of our low density or one deep MOSs in a brigade, that coupled with the high training tempo, it's often difficult for that chain of command to let their one and only property book officer or their one and only mobility officer attend PME. But it's essential that that warrant officer attends PME at the right time based on what's outlined in DAPAM 600-3, which outlines career professional development.
What would you say to a CW3 or even CW4 listening right now that aspires to someday rise to the position that you now hold?
Yeah, so a few things come to mind. Working hard, learning, sharpening your skills, keeping up with changes, because the Army changes a lot. Reading Army regulations, staying in tune with doctrine or those field manuals or Army technique publications, and technical manuals as well. I would also suggest writing an article for a professional military publication. Attention to detail always helps, being able to communicate effectively, always supporting your chain of command, and then being humble, not arrogant, as well as having that element of leader presence, bearing, fitness, deployability, and then ACFT as well, and then being a leader of character as well as intellect.
It has been said that experience is the best teacher. What experience, success, or even failure have you learned the most from?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So when I was in high school, I served in junior ROTC for 4 years. I was on the armed drill team. I did the color guard. I did the physical training team, and then orienteering, which is, if you're not familiar, it's like a map reading and land navigation. So I learned about teamwork, attention to detail, military structure, and then discipline as well. So, that coupled with the way I was raised by my parents, along with those different skills and experience, I would say absolutely helped me succeed in life as well as the military. So that's one thing. And then on the failure piece, so not a lot of folks know this, but I guess it's going to be widely known now. But when I was stationed in Hawaii around 2001, I attended air assault school. And on that last training day, you have to do a 12-mile road march in less than 3 hours. So I didn't complete that road march, and I was sent back to my unit without my air assault wings. So I tell you, it hurt, and I learned from that failure. I increased the way I trained for that distance, and I went back a month later, and then I completed that 12-mile road march and under the 3-hour time limit. So I learned from that. It made me better. It forced me to kind of make sure I was better prepared, which I would say, learning from failure is absolutely important in life.
Hey, sir, we're at the end of our episode, and I just want to tell you, thank you so much for, just your time today. It's meant a lot.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I really, really do.
Well, everybody, it's so great to hear senior warrant officers share mentorship with those they seek to serve. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing how a senior warrant officer's leadership can ultimately contribute to meeting the Army's needs for both the current and future fight. For updates on Cohort W and the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Simply search for @WOHF1918 or the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation. Finally, to learn more about how you can support programs like this, please visit warrantofficerhistory.org.